What would be your number one tip for first-time buyers when it comes to placing an offer? What is the difference between freehold and leasehold? You've actually now sold almost £30 million worth of property. The estate agent is there to act in the best interest for the seller. Georgie's average saving for her buying clients is £15,000 off the asking price. We use really advanced technology to predict which properties in a certain area or road or block are most likely to come up for sale in the next 6 months. Questions that people should ask on viewings.
To be fair, if I hadn't had those initial conversations, we might have had a first offer lower than that.
What happens the more links you've got in the chain?
The risk pretty much doubles.
What questions should I ask during a property viewing? How does a buyer potentially see red flags? Eyes wide open, all this stuff you should know before you make an offer. One thing that we do a lot of, which I think is really good, is we take our clients' property searches off market. Would you say you've got a certain more heightened awareness of a first-time buyer's empathy? She's done everything in a estate agency. She's been an agent assistant, she's been our operations manager. So welcome to the next episode of Your Next Chapter, the podcast brought to you by Power Bespoke, where we share the very best advice for home movers. So today, this is a must watch for first-time buyers. The whole episode is dedicated to answering the most common questions to help first-time buyers, who are, by the way, the most underrepresented portion of the market, but they account for up to 40% of the market. So without first-time buyers, the whole market's stuffed, because the first-time buyer buys, the second-time buyer buys, third, fourth, fifth, people move in the property ladder. And I'm massively proud to have Georgie Kemp, GK,
Hello.
AKA Gina. We won't go into Gina on this episode. But let me give you a quick background, right? Georgie's got loads of advice to share because she's literally 3 months ago been a first-time buyer herself. So not only is she an incredible estate agent helping first-time buyers every single day, she's also just been through the actual process as a consumer. So she's got loads of advice to share. Give you a quick background. I'm going to talk for a minute, George. I promise I'll shut up. But Georgie's been with the team for over 6 years. Is it 6 years? Over 6 years?
Anniversary was only last week.
Happy anniversary. Of course, I remember that. She's done everything in a estate agency. She's been an agent assistant. She's been our operations manager. But for the last 3 years, she's been a lean, mean selling machine, an incredible estate agent. She bumped her head one day and said, "Do you know what? I've been watching what these guys are doing. I think I could do it." And she does it very well. Interesting one for you, George. You've actually now sold almost £30 million worth of property. Georgie is, like all of our team members, a certified advanced negotiator, not just a negotiator, certified advanced. Come on to that in a minute. That's very relevant for this podcast. And like all our agents, Georgie represents buyers as well as sellers. Let me frame that a little bit because that's very unusual for the UK. So you think of an estate agent, you think the estate agent helps you because you're buying a house. They don't. They're paid by the seller. They're there to get the seller the best outcome. I have a huge belief, and that's what we put together with Power Bespoke, that every buyer should have professional representation when buying a property. Whether you're first-time buyer or seventh-time buyer, we'll touch on this a lot more when we get to it as well. But when you're negotiating, you should never negotiate something when there's emotion involved. Georgie's average saving for her buying clients is £15,000 off the asking price. Now that's thinking a little bit like seller's got an estate agent to get them the highest price. Buyer's got Georgie in their corner. The average saving she'll negotiate for a buyer is 15 grand, which I think is incredible. That's enough from me, George. And let's jump into it. So first-time buyers, I feel for first-time buyers because they're the most, like I said, underrepresented portion of the market. What do you think? Let's go from the very start, right? Someone says, I want to buy a property. What's your advice in where they should start their property search?
First of all, know their budget and what they're working with before they get excited.
How do they find that out?
Mortgage broker. So go to your independent, find somebody, get somebody recommended. I had somebody that was absolutely brilliant. Our budget changed slightly because me and my partner are a little bit more of a challenging client. So it was really useful for us to really understand what we could before we then go on to Rightmove, put our minimum, maximum in and everything like that.
Avoid getting too excited before you actually know. And you touch on something there as well about independent broker. Why that?
Well, they have range of the whole of market, so they can give you the best advice out there rather than just because the lender that they represent is telling them what they can do. So they literally specialise in absolutely everything. So I would only ever go to independent.
Love it. So quite a lot of buyers come to us and say, I've been to my bank, I've been to HSBC, I've got a mortgage offer. What would you say to that?
Speak to a mortgage broker.
Love it.
You can plug in numbers into online as well. You don't even need to go to the bank and it will come up with what you can afford. In reality, it's probably not, but equally, they're not going to be offering you the best rates. Every single bank's completely different, and just because they're the bank you're with, they're not going to necessarily be the one that you get your mortgage with. I mean, mine's not.
Love it. Same, actually. And what's interesting about that is when you go to your bank, you've got the option of one lender. When you go to a whole of market broker, and I'll touch on that in a minute because there's two types of brokers that can class themselves as independent. One's truly whole of market independent. They'll have access to probably 300 to 500 different lenders. I've had situations where my mortgage broker, he does the mortgages for the mortgage advisors at a particular bank.
Right.
I won't say which bank, but they work for the bank themselves. And not even they can get access to the same rates that my mortgage broker can. And the reason for that is because you get what they call network exclusives. So let's say a mortgage network of 700 brokers, they all part of a network. They put so much business through, they get exclusive rates that not even someone can get walking off the street to that bank. So that's a great first tip. If you think you've got a good mortgage offer from your bank, have a broker review it and say, yes, you've got the best offer that you can possibly get.
Look at your options.
Check this out. Love that. So start with the budget.
Get yourself out there.
Love it.
Get on right. Well, not necessarily, pick your favourite portal rather than flicking between all of them and just become a really clever buyer. So mine personally is Rightmove, just because I'm used to it. I like the layout and all the rest of it, and set up all your alerts. Make sure you know where you're looking. You might be more, a variety of kind of areas. It might be a case that you will only move to one area, but make sure you know that, so then you can look at the areas and get all of the alerts set up, so you're not having to every night relook, because you know that you're being notified every time something is being added and amended and all the rest of it.
Love it. Power tip. I like sharing a few of them. Zoopla. Check all the portals. Have your preference. Check all of them. The main ones are Rightmove, Zoopla, and On the Market. Zoopla have this really cool, not so cool if you're a seller, but cool if you're a buyer, where you can sort your search results in most reduced order, or oldest first, or newest first, and blah, blah, blah. A little power tip that I'll come onto later on is everyone's chasing the latest, newest listings to market. That means that as a first-time buyer, you've got loads of competition. What you should be doing is actually going for the ones that have been on the market the longest and are most likely to be open to an offer. But that's a really good, start searching, speak to agents. I'll touch in a minute about taking your property search off market, because we do that for a lot of buyers, right? But we'll come on to that. Questions that people should ask on viewings.
The seller's position, probably one of the most important, because depending on your time frames, that's going to be the most relevant. So are they buying on? If so, have they found? That sort of thing, because you can use that later on. Now, as a first-time buyer, you're probably quite flexible, but let's say the seller does need to find and all the rest, we can really push that on your offer, because you can say, because I'm a first-time buyer, I can help you find, in essence. So I'd say that's probably one of the most important, just to really understand the seller. I mean, you can find out for yourself, but having a look at how long it's actually been on the market, if it has reduced, that sort of thing. But asking them about the activity levels that it's had. Of course, you're going to take it as a pinch of salt, because the agent is trying to sell the property. They're not going to say, no, I've not had anything. But still, it's worthwhile sort of asking those sort of questions.
Yeah, so things like, seller's position, good one. It's interesting, though, because through their position in certain situations, the agent's not really allowed to disclose. So, like, if they're divorcing, as an agent, you can't say they're divorcing, because that could influence the amount someone's likely to offer. You could say they've got no chain, they're just moving on. That's probably as far as you can go. So in some situations, you might never get the actual true outcome.
No.
Which leads in quite nicely, really, to I'm a big believer that it's not so much asking the estate agent is a little bit irrelevant, because they're going, like you just said, they're going to say what they need to say to have a good outcome. Things like, what are the neighbours like? The agent's going to say, yeah, really nice, and the neighbourhoods are nice, but they've never even lived, so they haven't got a clue. My advice to people is don't say much on the first viewing. See if you get the feeling. What's more important is what you don't say. I'll come on to that in a minute. And then insist or ask for a second viewing when the owner's home, then go deep with the questions. That's when's like, what's your neighbours like? Have you improved the property much since you've been here? When was the boiler last serviced? All this stuff that you've got to take at face value. It's all stuff that your solicitor will look into later on. We'll talk about solicitors and conveyancing in a sec. But the most important thing, I think, when viewing a house is not to say things that could influence the negotiation when it gets to it. What do you think the most important factor when a buyer is positioning themselves to you as an estate agent, right? So let's say you're marketing an apartment. I think you just sold an apartment this week, actually. Today, even better. Probably a first-time buyer buying that.
Yeah.
Not an investor right now, that's for sure. Not many of them around.
And to be fair, these ones have been amazing. And I reported that back to the seller.
Love that.
An on-it buyer makes all the difference.
Let's unpack that then. So just today you've agreed a sale to an on-it buyer. We like on-it buyers. What made them on it?
Sending everything I need. Sometimes before asked, but as soon as I've asked, like, what else can I do? What else can I do? So anyway, they placed their initial offer. They did it in writing. They gave me their...
Was it in writing off their own back, or was it because you
No,
asked
they
them
did it off their own back, to be fair.
Love that. They must have watched our podcast.
But they were your perfect buyer. So yeah, the first offer was in writing. They had their mortgage advisor's detail. Well, they did our form, which does prompt a lot of this, but other agents don't have that. So what you want to be doing is giving all your details, mortgage advisor, because they're going to they need to financially qualify you. They sent their proof of funds, admittedly, that was when prompted as well, and the solicitor details as well.
Bang, straight there, no chasing, organised.
Yeah.
Got there, as we spoke about, I think in the previous video, go back and watch it if you haven't yet, but they had their power team around them. I don't call it a power team just because I'm Perry Power. It's literally referred to as your power team, like your mortgage advisor, your surveyors if need be, maybe not so much on leasehold. We'll come on to that in a minute. Your solicitors, mortgage advisors, all that kind of stuff.
Well, this one, for example, like I then acknowledged the email, and then next thing I know, I've got a call from the broker and he introduced himself and all the rest, and I was like...
More of those, please.
I know. So it is having a good support team around a first-time buyer that can help you, because again, I've said to my client, not only can they afford it, I've spoken to their broker who's also on it, and he's also confirmed their affordability. It's not a case that they've put a few numbers into the internet and they say they can afford this.
Well, that's the trouble with them online generated things, is it that they'll give those out like confetti, because it's like, what's your income? This is how much we can give you, multiples of income. It doesn't go into the deeper side. So you ideally want a kind of lender underwritten AIP, agreement in principle. And so let's keep on that theme for a minute, because that's really interesting. Did you accept the first offer they placed?
No.
You didn't, George, because you're a pro. But they increased a bit more, right?
Yeah. So
we don't know the address, so that's fine. We don't know their names.
Yeah.
What was the property on the market for, their initial offer, and then where did it get agreed?
Okay, so it was on for offers in excess of 325.
Offers in excess of 325. We're going to do a video just for sellers soon. So subscribe, because you're going to need to know why it was offered in excess of 325. Nice.
Now, I did the video myself, so I'd already kind of peppered it up and really, initiated that it is offers in excess of, and a respectable buyer, because they did come in at 327.
Nice, couple of grand straight up.
Which I was pretty pleased with, because I normally say to clients, we'll go in for offers in excess of, but in any market, especially in today, they're going to come in low. It's expected, because it's going to get rejected anyway. Anyway, these guys came in with a good, strong first offer.
You would have respected that as well and taken that into consideration when you're considering how much we push these guys for, right? Because they've listened, they've not just said, well, I'm going to forget what George says to me entirely. Yeah. Here's 320.
To be fair, if I hadn't had those initial conversations, we might have had a first offer lower than that.
Sign of a great agent there, protecting the seller's interest before they've even had an offer. Yeah. Then what happened? Got
rejected. And the next day they emailed again. Their preferred communication was on email, so that's great. And they came up to 328,500. So small increase, but it was a strong first offer.
Yes. If they'd started at 330,
no,
320.
Yeah.
If they'd started at that, then
they'd have jumped up to that. Yeah.
So that's a really good, perfect example of good agent negotiating for the seller, reasonable buyer, good outcome for everyone.
Well, that wasn't the final.
Oh, of course it was. No.
Come on, best of three. So yeah, we ended up kind of agreeing, because originally the sellers were kind of depending on whether they would buy on or break the chain. They could probably do either. So because the seller was like, actually, I might break the chain anyway, we said, right, well, we'll break the chain, move as quickly as you want to at 330. So small difference, but I had previously had this one agreed before. So out of pure, I want to get them the 330 again. That's exactly what I did.
So much to unpack there. So here's some great tips for first-time buyers. Any buyer, actually, but more so first-time buyers. And I'm quite passionate about first-time buyers because it's like I said, they're the most underrepresented part of the market. If you're selling a property, you've got a selling agent for you selling a property, so you can pull on their advice in these situations. But when you're a first-time buyer, you're on your Jack Jones, and it's your mate down the pub saying what to do. And what's interesting, if they hadn't increased their offer from 3 to 8.5, would you advise the seller potentially to accept them as buyers?
Yes.
Because what?
Because they were on it at the beginning.
Yeah. So better to have, we could keep trying to get 330 Mr. Smith, but you might be left with an absolutely unorganised, painful buyer to deal with, rather than take the good offer from the buyers that we've got.
Yeah.
So the good lesson there is it's not all about the money.
No.
All of the time. And the other lesson there for first-time buyers watching this is you've got 3 areas that you can use in the negotiation when it comes to negotiating any property purchase. Do you remember what they are, George?
Yep.
Go on.
Well, the money side of it, time frames.
Love that.
And fixtures and fittings.
Boom. So everyone just thinks, oh, put that offer in, it'll get rejected or not. But the other 2 areas of negotiation that more so first-time buyers forget is the timescales. In that instance, you said to the buyer, right, give us another 1,500 quid and we'll break the chain so you can move in quicker.
Whereas, again, giving them a bit of credit is they were pushing and saying, because the seller hasn't found, remind, like in the email, they were basically saying, we are first-time buyers, so we're really flexible on that. So that's how a buyer should be using it.
Yeah.
Of course, I then used it against them because we were able to break the chain. But at the end of the day, it's the same with any negotiation is everybody's walking away happy. You know, they would prefer to move quicker. You know, they're living at the parents and all the rest of it. So actually it was a win for them. They're getting a broken chain, less risk and all the rest of it, which can move quickly for that little bit extra that the seller really did need and want to get.
Let's touch on that less risk comment you just made. What happens the more links you've got in the chain?
The risk pretty much doubles. So what you've got to imagine is every transaction, due to the way that the conveyancing happens, again, we can touch on more of that, but there is risk of fall through. Every time that if a seller's then buying on, that property has the same risk. So it's then doubled and then so on. You know, you can have a chain of 1 to... Well, it's never ending, really, is it? Like,
it's probably what records
what's the? I would
7,
love
maybe?
to know what the maximum actually is that you've
I think
ever
I've had about a chain of 8 once upon a time, and it never went through first time. It always fell through.
Different areas.
What's
of
the
it.
average fall through rate in the UK?
You're looking at about 37%.
Yeah, 30 to 40%. And for every link you add to that chain,
Times it.
It gets increased by at least 10%. So if you've got a 5-link chain, it is literally touch and go.
Yeah.
Something in that chain is going to break and has a house of cards domino effect. And
that's the frustrating thing for actually anywhere in the chain is you are financially invested, as we know. You pay money on all the rest of it and it can fall through. Now, if it's a first-time buyer buying an end of chain and it's fallen through because the survey's come back, you can kind of go, it was not meant to be. I'm pleased we didn't because that house was going to cost us loads of money. Whereas when it's a chain, your property, your dream house is still there. It's another one. You can't really justify it as much. You've just
when it's got nothing related to you.
Yeah, it's
like,
not
I'm
okay.
ready, and that person changed their mind at the last minute, and that's a big problem with the process in this country. But you
can't change it.
You can't change it, but you can negotiate yourself out of it, just like your buy is just done.
Yeah.
And it's important to note as well that I think you said previously that you squeeze them for more, as you should, and that's really important to note because what every buyer has to remember is the estate agent is there to act in the best interest for the seller, not the buyer. It's a bit hard to kind of palate that. The agent has a duty of care and hopefully they're going to give good service to the buyer, but they're obligated contractually actually to make sure they're doing the best by the seller.
Yeah.
And at times that means that you're going to have to piss off a few buyers. Try and avoid it, but that's exactly why every buyer in the UK should have an estate agent like Georgie acting for them and negotiating them the lowest price and pushing back to say, actually, no, we're not going to offer that much. What are you going to give us back in return if we do? And most first-time buyers I find are just a sitting duck. They're getting pushed around by the estate agent through sheer ignorance, and that's not a nice situation to be in. How I position this is, I don't even know how or why it's even legal in this country, but to have one person supposedly representing both sides, the seller and the buyer, it's a bit like having a divorcing couple use the same divorce lawyer. It would never happen. this lawyer's negotiating for the Mr., this lawyer's negotiating for the Mrs., and they get the best retrospective outcomes for each other.
Yeah.
And what you said is really true, is that the end of a negotiation, not everyone needs to be skipping down the road about the outcome and really happy about it, but everyone needs to be content with the outcome. I use that word content because they would have probably rather have kept their offer at 3 to 8.5, but they're content with the fact that they've given a bit more and they've got a little bit back because they're going to, now there's no chain, no risk of fall through. That's a really good example. One tip I want to quickly share is what not to say on viewings. So I find this, when first time buyers offer on houses with me, they say things like, we want to start our offer at. And I'm like, why did you say that? Because I have to do my best now and get the seller the best price. I now know they're going to increase from the initial offer. So now it's, let's go.
Or I've had somebody say that I would pay $550, so I'll start at $540, and they've just told me.
Pause that a minute there, like that. And this is two estate agents working in the industry every day, just saying to you that I've always hear people say, I'm going to start my offer at. Georgie's saying that I would pay $550, but I want to start at $500. The 500's been forgotten about. We're thinking $550, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get them to $560. So what you don't say to the estate agent is just as important as what you do say. Now, I changed my mind a little bit because I think it is important that you let an estate agent know that you are very keen on the house. I used to say, don't show your hand or don't show your cards, but actually you should. But there's a line that you shouldn't cross. And one of those things is saying words like, start my offer. I would like to pay less than, but I would happily pay X. And this is where people forget the estate agent is paid more money when you pay more money. You need to remember that and get yourself, even if you don't have a professional in your corner like Georgie, have someone else handle the negotiation.
Yeah.
Have your mum, your sister, your auntie, someone that's detached from it. You say to them, I don't want to go a penny over $550, do your best. Because then at least you've not got the emotion, and the agent can then know that they're not dealing or that they're not pushing on the people that they know are most likely to say yes.
Yeah, with the heartstrings.
With the heartstrings, with the emotion. And we love to work in the homeowner market. You know, there's certain markets, there's investor markets, there's new homes market. We like the homeowner, home mover market because the emotion that's attached to it. So let's keep on that theme. We're not ones for... We've just said, because a common thing people Google, actually, I've done some research, what questions should I ask during a property viewing? And the answer is whatever you want, really, but you're best off waiting and asking those questions to the seller.
But I think it's important to start building the rapport then, because as we were saying before, is actually having that good relationship with the agent, not only to get the offer accepted, but remember you also want the keys as well. So you're going to want to be able to rely on that agent, to be able to call them up and ask them to help you out and that sort of thing. Yeah.
You want a good relationship. How much influence do you think the selling agent has over the seller's decision making?
A lot, because they're the messenger. In essence, they're the one controlling the situation and everything like that. At the end of the day as well, the seller's chosen that agent because they trust the agent. They've not just chosen anybody. So they're going to trust what the agent says.
So important. We've both had it, I'm sure. People are like, just put it to you as seller and come back to me what they say. And you're like, but I know they're not going to accept it because they've already rejected offers higher than that. Just do your job and put it to the seller. Okay, but the chances of us actually advising that someone that's that arsey gets the property is quite rare, right? Because all the time sellers say, what do you think?
And that's the thing, we're never going to stand in the way of a buyer and a seller because that's our job, is to put them together. But having a buyer that's going to, well, we've got to also advise of, do we think the buyer's going to make it all the way? Because that fall through rate, our job's to reduce that. Yeah. And we can reduce that by qualifying these buyers, testing their temperament and all the rest of it. So when we put an offer forward to the seller, it's a bit like what we were saying with what the buyer can negotiate with, but it's the same when we put it forward to the seller. I'll also say what they're like as a buyer, is they're really, really organised. That's going to help us in the long run and all the rest of it. It will come against you.
Versus they made an offer. It's taken me 7 days for them to get back to me. They make an offer. I've kind of squeezed it out of them. They've been quite hard to deal with. That's a red flag.
Yeah.
Love it. So that leads on nicely to my next question. How does a buyer potentially see red flags?
In what sense?
What could so in any sense, so let's say I'm a first time buyer, a red flag could be the house has fallen through 4 times. So it's back on the market for the 4th time. Mm-hmm. That's a red flag because I'll be saying, well, why is it fallen through 4 times? Yeah. You'll get, hopefully, the most honest answer that you can. It's also important to note, for the people watching that estate agents are bound by what's called a Material Information Act.
Yeah.
Give me a little example of the kind of things that we have to be disclosing now to buyers.
If we were doing like leasehold, for example, then you've got all of the terms with that. So everything that has, lease length, management fee, all the rest of it. But just in general, neighbour disputes, that's one that we have to disclose. Boundaries, I mean, that's not something that's come in recently, but there's That
ties in really well with about what are the neighbours like. So
Yeah.
you could get a lie reply to that. They're lovely. When last night they were screaming at each other over the fence. You only actually have to disclose problematic neighbours if the police or the council have been called. You've had a massive bust up of them last night because they parked over your drive. You ain't got to mention that, and people wouldn't mention that. No. However, in the Material Information Act, you legally have to disclose it in the paperwork. So advice for first-time buyers and any buyer actually on that, when you're speaking to a selling agent, ask to see the Material Information Act questionnaire. That's a good little tip. Because that would include things like
age of boiler, boiler heating system, that sort of thing.
Things like any structural issues that need to be disclosed. If a sale's fallen through 4 times, it might have failed survey 4 times, and they have to now disclose that. And so I like the Material Information Act because it's saving a lot of time for people. But then you got to hope that the seller is being honest as well,
because it's their answers.
So let's quickly talk about leasehold, freehold, because one of the most common questions that people ask us as agents, but also they're Googling and YouTubing, what is the difference between freehold and leasehold?
So freehold typically is a house because you own everything, so the actual property along with the land underneath. Leasehold, again, typically the flat because you own not the building, but the flat, but not the land that it's actually built on. So you need to be careful when you're looking at leasehold properties because there are the additional costs. So lease length, really important because lenders are getting probably even more tight. Something under 100, they will lend on it. There's, you get specialist lenders and all the rest of it. Under 80 years, that's when it becomes much more problematic. But consider the lease length because if it's under 100 years, you're probably going to need to look at extending it, which can cost, it varies, doesn't it? But
the lower it gets, the more expensive it gets. But you've also got to consider how long you're planning on staying in that property as to whether or not it's going to be a problem.
How long it will be late.
If you've got a 105-year lease and it's like a stepping stone and you've got 2 years in it and you need to buy a house, probably not a massive issue.
No.
If it's 105 years, you think it's going to be a 10 years, big issue. Make it the current seller's issue to solve rather than your issue to solve once you bought it.
And make sure you know how much it's going to cost as well because it does vary. So alongside the lease length, you've also got ground rent. So as I said, you don't own the land. So you rent, there's the ground rent. Again, that varies. Got to be careful because some of them are like doubling. What is it? Yeah. And again, lenders don't like it.
Yeah.
So that makes, again, bit of a legal headache. Well, not massively, but a hurdle that you need to overcome.
I mean, it can add 6 to 8 weeks plus cost to the transaction because more recent new builds, they've had a lease that is unmortgageable unless there's a deed of variation and the lease is varied. And what that is, we'll touch on it quickly, but it basically says, in the lease it says, so ground rent is paid to the person that owns the land the building sits on. It's like ground rent. And in the lease, that doubles every 10 years. But what happens is, say it's £300 now, then it's £600, then it's £1,200, then it's £2,400. So with some of these leases, in 30 years' time, say the lease is 125 years, but in 30 years' time, your ground rent could be £5,000 a year. Lenders ain't touching them.
I've got one going through at the moment, and also the thing is it just takes so much time. So we, again, even getting a deed of variation agreed, so the lender didn't like the original suggestion, so we had to and fro, and you've got to remember you're dealing with then the management company. It's a third party, so it's even slower than just the solicitors talking. Yeah. But then you've got to get everyone to sign it. So it's still at the moment being signed. But again, third party trying to chase them. It just costs, it takes a lot of time and it costs money.
So power tip right there is if you're buying the leasehold, get a copy of the lease quick time.
Yeah. Because
you're going to have your solicitor on side. I would say send the lease to the solicitor from the get-go.
Yeah.
And just say, can you quickly review this? Charge me £200. Before I go and spend money on surveys, we do searches, and it's 8 weeks down the line that we discover it's got a non-mortgageable lease. Let's nip it in the bud now. One of your questions to the estate agent and seller could be, are you happy to do a deed of variation?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, you move on.
Yeah, because again, it's not one of those questions that it's like, don't buy a leasehold and don't buy one with the ground rent that's like that, because it can be overcome, but just make sure you're not the one paying for
And if you're renting somewhere and you're planning on being out there in 2 months' time, and then you've got another month to wait for this deed of variation, which it can take that long.
Yeah.
I've had it. You need to allow for that in your negotiation and your timescales and that kind of thing.
But then another cost, so on top of the ground rent, is again management fees as well. So again, that will vary. Now that's typically just like the electricity, if the block's got a lift, that sort of thing. But it can vary from, well, I've got some at the moment where they're £6,000 a year. Again, lenders will take that into consideration. So just because a lender said they'll borrow you X, they'll take that into consideration. All of a sudden, your affordability's dropped.
Yeah, of course, because if you're getting a mortgage on a leasehold and it's an added cost that comes out of the income that you earn to be able to pay the mortgage, which is awesome. So eyes wide open, all this stuff you should know before you make an offer.
Yeah.
Is the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah.
What happens a lot of the time though, now we're very good in being public and transparent from the get-go. A lot of this stuff don't come out for 4 to 6 to 8 weeks down the line.
Yeah.
And then it falls through. So like, I didn't realise it was that much maintenance. Or sometimes it's even scheduled to go up next year, isn't it? So you've got your kind of budget. These leasehold blocks have a budget for the year. And it might be that this year we've run at a deficit. So maintenance this year was £2,000. But next year, once you've bought the place, it's going to be £4,000. So the seller says, well, I pay £2,000 a year currently, thinking nothing of it.
Yeah.
You get the leasehold management pack and it says, in our budget for next year, each flat's going to pay £4,000.
Yeah.
So that's doubled.
So it's asking for a breakdown of what it is, but also making sure that they do actually apply for that management pack early doors as well. So then you get that information as quickly as possible.
What's the longest you've had for a management pack to come back?
Gosh, I don't know off the top of my head.
I had one that was 6 weeks.
I was going to say a month.
Yeah. A month is probably quite
Average,
yeah. Week or two is doing well. 6 weeks, I've had one, and that was painful.
And you've got to remember, freehold can have everything done in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So when, again, something to remember, know if you're buying freehold or leasehold, because the length from offer accepted to exchange is going to be completely different.
You teed me up lovely there, Jules. What about a share of freehold then?
So a share of freehold is, well, a mixture of the two. So typically, again, it's going to be flats, but normally it's more of a conversion. So there's a house and there's 4 flats within, and they share the freehold. So it's literally split between however many flats that there are.
And that tends to work well because there's no ground rent. As a collective, you own the ground that it lives on.
Yeah.
How it's normally set up is you've got, say the building's number 1 Any Street. It'd be number 1 Any Street Limited company that owns the building.
Yeah.
Each owner of the flats owns an equal share in the company.
Yeah.
Hence you've got a share of freehold. The other benefit to share of freehold is that if your lease runs low, you can grant yourself a new lease. The other benefit to share of freehold is you generally just either pay for maintenance collectively as it's needed. Yeah. Or you'll put 50 quid a month into a pot company bank account. Yeah. Into a little pot. So George, let's talk about, we've spoken a bit about property searching, dealing with agents. What's incredible, and many clients that we deal with, we help them search off market. You helped a guy called Nick recently, lovely guy, first time buyer, a teacher. He's never negotiated anything really in his life. So he decided to use a professional to help him negotiate. I remember you had a meeting with him in the office, got a kind of property search meeting. How did that meeting go? Like, what was the structure of it? Just want to touch a little bit on that because I think everyone can rush to Rightmove because everyone rushes to Rightmove, but that's actually probably not always the best thing to do. But
it started off a little bit how we started off at the beginning of the kind of the video. I was saying about how to set up your search sort of thing. So I needed to really understand what his motivations were and everything. So understanding what he actually wanted. You know, everybody's going to have a long list. We got to shorten that initially and just kind of cut it to the main points. I tend to find on that everyone's got a list of 10 things. Yeah. And I say, what are the non-negotiables? Yeah. You know, 2 beds in Red Hill, no more than 375 grand. Everything else is up for grabs. But in that meeting, I wanted to know the 10 because I needed to understand exactly what he was looking for. So then we can shortlist the non-negotiables, So then I understand what he's looking for. Yeah, because he might say, no, I'd rather pay 410 and get a garden. I'd rather push my budget, but I really want a garden for the summer. Yeah. Nice. So you sat down, look at what's out there at the minute, I guess, look at the stuff that's been on the market a long time and might be due a reduction soon. Yeah. One thing that we do a lot of, which I think is really good, is we take our
clients' property searches off market.
Yeah.
So what I always say to people is, for every house on Rightmove, for the 6 months preceding them being on Rightmove, they weren't on Rightmove, but they were having discussions around a dinner table about moving and going on Rightmove.
Yeah.
So with our off-market search, what we do, and the issue is, if it's got to Rightmove, it's a bit too late, because then you've got all the other first-time buyers that have got Rightmove alerts set up, that are going to see it. Can I view it? There's 4 viewings on a Saturday. You've missed the boat almost a little bit. So we use really, really advanced technology to predict which properties in a certain area or road or block are most likely to come up for sale in the next 6 months. And so with our direct off-market approaches, we've got first-time buyers and other buyers one-off opportunities. Or this person's thinking of selling in 6 months. Do you want to have a look at it early? That's a really good way that if you bring on the skills of an agent, they'll be able to help you with. Let's talk about negotiation. We've touched on it a little bit, but I think this is the most important part. Whether you see a house that comes on Rightmove and you love it and you go for it straight away, whether you found it off market, whether you've viewed 20 and asked the right questions or the wrong questions, whether you've said the right things or the wrong things, all that doesn't matter at all, because it can be corrected and clawed back at the negotiation stage. What would be your number one tip for first-time buyers when it comes to placing an offer?
Don't do it yourself.
Boom. You bought a house recently, right?
Yes.
And this is amazing. So the average age of a first-time buyer in the UK is 34 years old. How old are you, George?
26.
26. Who negotiated yours for you?
Steph.
Or should we say...
She had to take over. Yeah. Look, you can be the best negotiator in the world, but still not be able to do it for yourself. And sorry, but you did the same.
You're right. I was about to tell you that as well.
But the heartstrings that we use in negotiation, when you're doing it for yourself, you are the heartstrings, so it doesn't work. So yeah, I did start, and I did consult with Steph anyway, but I started doing it, and I remember saying to her, "Oh, I'll just increase by an extra £5,000. No, that's a fair amount." And she was like, "You don't need to."
But you did because you really wanted the house.
Because I wanted the house. I was like, because I think they'd given it away that at X price I could have it, and at that point I just wanted it.
Yeah.
So I was ready to go to the price, exactly what I do, exactly the same.
And just put it to bed.
I didn't, and it got accepted at the lower price. So slow down.
How long was the Mexican standoff?
To be fair, the negotiations were quite quick. I think it was a few days from initial offer to officially being accepted.
That's still longer than a rookie, though.
Yeah.
Because most rookies, as we know, I say rookies, inexperienced buyers, they place an offer in the mid-afternoon, expect it to be all agreed, signed by the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
And you've got to slow it down.
Yeah, I was the same. I had someone else handle mine, and I've handled a lot of other estate agents' negotiation for them. So get someone else to do it. If it's not a professional, if you haven't got a Georgie or a Steph that you can pull on, just have someone else in your friend circle, family circle.
Yeah.
Even better than that, though, get a professional like Georgie or Steph or anyone else in the team, and they will actually structure the negotiation.
Well, it's a bit like, obviously earlier we talked about my 3 stages for my seller. Now when I'm working with buyers, it's that just on its head.
Yeah.
So exactly the same. I'm not here to lose the property, because again, we've all got to walk away content.
Yeah.
So I need to know what they would pay for it, but do the 3 stages so then I can get it for the lowest price possible.
When you place an offer on a house for a buyer you're representing, and the selling agent accepts the first offer that you place, what do you think?
Firstly, thank you.
Yeah.
Because in this instance, I'm working for the buyer.
And you would have had a couple more in tank, but they didn't.
But you just can't believe it.
Yeah.
Because as we said from the beginning, the agent is working for the seller, and their due diligence...
They should be working for the seller.
They should be working for the seller, not just getting the house sold.
Getting the deal in the pipe.
And the seller would definitely want to be getting them the absolute most.
I always say to my buyers, I'm like, ooh, we probably, even with my pre-research, structured, 6-step, 8-day...
Should have been even more cheeky.
Yeah, should have been even more cheeky, because they've been a handoff for that. So that's really good. We've touched on the 3 areas of negotiation. I want to recircle back to that, because it's important that once you've... And here's how you got to look at it, right? You've got to structure it to be like, it's on at 300. I'm going to go in at 270, let's say. What things should people consider when deciding what to start their negotiation at? Because I hear a lot of people say on Facebook groups and online, just start at 10% lower.
Case by case, every single one. How long have they been on the market? Because if you were part of a open day, launch day, they've just come to market, and because you physically saw other people viewing it at the same time, you're not going to be as cheeky because you're only going to shoot yourself in the foot. What you want to be looking at is when it went on the market. So if it's, our kind of rule of thumb is 6 to 8 weeks or longer, they need to be looking at their price because they've not sold for, could be multiple different reasons, but that's what we're going to utilise. Yeah. If it's on with any other agents as well.
Are they showing signs of desperation?
Yeah.
Are they flooding the market with it?
Yeah, if it has reduced previously as well, because it's struggling to sell. So loads of different things you can really get to know about that property before you even place your first offer. But that's why you need an expert.
So a good example there is someone was on market at 300, they dropped to 280. There's no point yesterday. There's no point you going in at 260.
Well, to be fair, with my purchase, I asked for a second viewing and the same day they reduced the property. And I was like...
You're joking.
I know.
That estate agent needs GK to go and help them.
So that saved me £10,000 because I know that they would accept that £10,000 less.
So you booked a second viewing, and
I booked a second viewing. I think it was even the day that I was viewing as well. So I was prepared, ready to make an offer that day.
So you're kind of booked in to view it, and you're like, oh, they've dropped 10 grand off for me already.
Perfect, thank you. But you want to get there before they do drop the price.
That's the idea.
Because what could have happened, not in this instance, is all of a sudden the following day they do get 10 people round, and then I do then end up paying more. But you want to get there, and that's where you talked about earlier about what's been on the market the longest. Yeah. They're the best ones because you've not got the competition, and they're probably a bit more desperate.
And their agent will be priming them to be like, look, John, it's been 8 weeks.
You've got to reduce.
Whereas if you've got something for 300, they're probably their agent's probably saying to them, drop to 280. You go in at 270, and it's not even that much of a big offer. My advice to buyers, particularly first-time buyers, is if you do end up negotiating yourself, you really shouldn't be. But if you do, slow it down.
Yeah.
I was helping a buyer a few weeks ago, and we had a 12-day Mexican standoff. So my structure is what you're prepared to pay for it. Don't lie to me. Give me it. It's on at 300. Would you pay 300? If I had to, yes. Okay, fine. Don't hold nothing back from me, because if I'll call you and say, really sorry, John, it's gone to someone else, and you're like, oh, I was prepared to pay 300, that's on you. I can only help the best I can help, knowing the facts. But how it would work is it'd be maybe a 270 offer, expecting it to be rejected, increasing to 275 same day, then leaving it for 3 or 4 days and letting the agent come back to you. Then you might increase your offer, small amount, but that's my best and final, blah, blah, blah. What happened in this situation is we had maxed ourselves out. We had literally gone to the highest figure that we could afford to pay. So I said, look, we can't do much else. We've done our best. Let's leave it to them. Do not chase them. And they were like, should I call the agent? This was 3 days in. Should I call the agent? I've heard nothing. Nope. 5 days in. Really? Can't I find out what's going on? Nope. 12 days later, the agent called back and said, just to let you know, if the offer's still on the table, here's the important part, if the offer's still on the table, the seller would accept your offer. Our reply was, we love the house, but we've just seen something else we like. Our offer's now dropped back down to where it was. That's the game. That's the seller's and the agent's problem for mucking about for 12 days.
Well, they risked losing you completely.
Yeah. So we got it for a price that less than we were prepared to pay, actually, because they were mucking about for 12 days. Mm-hmm. So having the right people in your corner is really important.
Yeah.
Here's something that's really important as well. First-time buyers, they have professional advice at every stage of the transaction. The mortgage stage, the survey stage, the solicitor stage. They just don't have professional advice at the most important stage, which is choosing and negotiating the one that they're going to buy, to then kick in their professional advisors. So my message to everybody is watch this video 10 times, because I think we shared some really good advice in this video, and get yourself an agent. And it's not even that expensive. You look at the guy recently that you say 15,000 quid. I think you charged him 7. He's still a net positive 8,000 quid.
Well, I think also the crucial part to that is how much you want to be involved, because for that one, it was hand-holding because he was busy and couldn't be dealing with anything. Is you might have a really good solicitor that you don't need to help with the sales progression and everything else. But, we had tricky surveys to overcome and all the rest of it. So it was from start to finish, because as we said, the agent's not on your side, but you also don't choose the agent. So just going back to mine, actually, because this is quite relevant, is I know what the agents are all like, and I wanted that house, and it didn't matter who the agent was at the end of the day. But I then knew that I needed to then help with the progression side of it, because the solicitors don't do all of that, even when you have the best of them. And my partner, for example, had no idea what was going on, and I completely took the reins, but that's because I knew what I was doing. Most buyers don't.
No.
And I know a lot of people that I ask, how's your purchase going? And they go, I'm not really sure. I haven't heard from the solicitor in a couple of weeks. I'm sure they're cracking on. And it's like, nothing's happening. So email your solicitor and that sort of thing. So it is about the entire kind of process and knowing it. And if you don't know it, find out.
You're going to be walking in the dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Take control, plan it. If you're not planning it for yourself, you're going to be in someone else's plan, and their plan is generally to have you pay the highest price possible, because that person's plan is the estate agent that you're buying from. And we talk like this because, you know, we want to make agency more transparent. We want to humanize it. You know, you've been through the whole process yourself. Would you say you've got a certain more heightened awareness of a first-time buyer's empathy? Are you more empathetic now to a first-time buyer's messages all the time with what's going on and that kind of thing?
Because it's completely different being on the end to being in the middle of it. I didn't personally like it because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I'm used to controlling the whole entire process, being in touch with both solicitors and all the rest of it. In being a first-time buyer, you don't really hear that much, and no one really necessarily keeps you up to date all the time. So yeah, definitely, I think it's a really hard process to go through, and even more so if you don't actually know what's happening.
Teach yourself. There's loads of resources out there. There's loads of guides on our website. I'll put a link in the description to a really good negotiation guide download that we've produced for buyers, particularly first-time buyers.
Be careful of what you're listening to as well. Make sure that the solicitor is the best solicitor who's giving you the best advice, and the broker, and hopefully an agent as well.
Love it. George, that was awesome. Great work.
Thank you.